Hi, my name is Jo Ferrie and I'm presenting alongside Dr. Miriam Snellgrove. So we're starting with the problems that we encounter as teachers of research methods. And just to position ourselves a little bit for you, we're both sociologists. We teach undergraduate and postgraduate research methods to students from either across a school of 6 subject areas or across a college of 5 schools. In terms of the problems we encounter, we have very large class sizes, often 200, 300 students, sometimes more. And this is different to the classes that students do in their disciplinary streams. So if they're doing a master's course in sociology, for example, the classes tend to be capped at 40 or 50. With us, there are 299 other students. There are also interdisciplinary spaces, but without the room to take advantage of that. So we don't have time to get to know our students, what projects they're studying, and then develop the materials in ways that engage them, that connect with them. We've got really diverse abilities in that classroom. Some students never studied methods before, some are really quite advanced. We have limited time to refresh our materials, refresh the course. So even when we have emerging methodologies, for example, around digital methodologies, there isn't a lot of space for us in workloads to retrain and then redesign the learning. And neither do we have any time or resource to support our DTAs or our tutors. So as a team, we're working in quite a disjointed way. Our assessment works with our course and our ILOs, but from a student perspective, they do a suite of methods courses, and the assignments could work better if they worked incrementally. And we would love some time to redevelop that, but we're still fighting for it. The purpose of this presentation is to show you our response to a report that was published last year. I'm the first author of this report, and I worked with the Technopolis group, and in particular Martin Wayne and Simon Gallagher. And we were funded by the Economic and Social Research Council to identify the skills gaps in postgraduate research students within the social scientists. And then we were asked to reimagine what training would look like that could close those gaps, but also produce the global leaders in research. And so what we're trying to do with this paper is think about how we can take the findings from that work and make them relevant to the Glasgow context, and how we deliver student-centred active learning. And we're going to use a conceptual framework borrowed from C. Wright Mills, which says that private problems are public issues. And in the learning environment, this then is a process between personal biographies of students, the skills and abilities of the teacher, but also acknowledging wider structural processes that frame learning. And that final point should become clear as we go through this presentation. As feminists, we see the personal is political. We see education as a radical act of learning and challenging wider systemic inequalities and practices. So we started also by thinking through what is our research practice and what aspects of that are missing from the curriculum that we currently offer around research methods training. And then we use the Ferrie report in a critical way to think, actually, some of these issues are really widespread. And so a structural response is required here to what and how we deliver research methods training. And the 3 ideas we really want to talk about here are vulnerability, fallibility, and failure. Vulnerability is about being human. It's about risk, and it's about safety. To use the example from qualitative methods, if I'm doing interviews, I need to use my humanness and my emotional skills to build rapport with my participants before the interview begins. But the way that ethics frameworks are set up often means that students are trained to diminish risk and to not expose their own vulnerabilities, to the point that then when they feel vulnerable, they don't really know what to do with those feelings or how to manage them in a professional way. Here's a quote from Lucy. This data is derived from Ferrie et al. I think the ESRC really pushes. They want to have students that are doing things which are going to have impact who are all researching really sensitive and hard-hitting, horrible topics that are really important, but it just feels like there isn't any preparation or support. Some people might have backgrounds in and working with people who have some of the issues or are in the situations they are researching. There's so many mistakes that could be made and that could really impact both the researcher and the participants, and there isn't like an advanced training module or anything on ethics or sensitive research. So it's this idea of mistakes. What we want with research training is to safeguard our researchers and their participants from mistakes that could be avoided. And this is part of research integrity. What we mean by fallibility is that students are confident with the limitations of their research and don't internalize the limitations of their research as a personal problem, because it's normal for research to be limited. Part of the problem is with reviewed journal articles, 8,000 words, we often need to present our research as if it all went to plan. We don't talk about mistakes and failures. And in addition to this, as educators, we're also not used to talking about mistakes and failures. So there are ongoing issues around supervisory support that's often extractive and exploitative of doctoral students and early career scholars, and this has long-lasting ramifications for how research is done, taught, and managed within the higher education sector. These quotes come from established researchers, experienced principal investigators, who are talking about managing projects where they themselves do not have the data skills to complete collection and analysis. In these two quotes, the example given was students, postdocs doing research using R and using Python. So platforms and software that have fairly recently become part of our toolkit. The first person said, "One of the most obvious challenges is that there is a pretense, a cloud of dishonesty, and established researchers are afraid to say they do not understand something. People need to be able to admit what they do or do not know." And another researcher said, "Many of the more advanced researchers will rely on postdocs or others for this kind of data collection and analysis work. They wouldn't do that under any other circumstances. Students will write the program, but it would be good to have the supervisor provide feedback. But many do not have that kind of experience to support students. So students are doing this work, postdocs are doing it, they're not really confident they're doing it, hitting the quality standards that they need to, and they haven't got senior members in the team that are able to scrutinise their work and ensure those quality standards are being hit. So this brings in another type of research integrity concern. And building on the previous two, failure is understood as a combination of personal struggles made worse by a lack of institutional support and understanding. This results in students lacking the necessary confidence to promote their career, and so failures, a lack of grant funding or having articles rejected, become seen as personal troubles rather than a normal part of living and working in the competitive and structurally unequal higher education sector. And there is quite a difference between the career pathways our current students are entering compared to the one that I was entering as I was finishing my PhD. From Amelie: "If you have supervisors who've been in academia for almost a whole career, and it's almost a disconnect between what I am facing as an early career scholar, there's so much pressure now, the amount of stuff you need to have on the CV." And she goes on to say, "We need to prioritise where to put our energy. I'm at the moment struggling with if I need to prioritise writing a peer-reviewed article or develop an interactive website with all of the PhD data that I have created. Which one do I go for? Which one is the best for my career?" From Ferrie et al, we can see that this kind of example is widespread across the UK, but it's also symbolic of a wider issues within the educational sector. For example, from Lucy talking about the experience of submitting an article for peer review, says, "Perhaps we could also work at trying to change the tradition, it seems, of reviewers going beyond constructive criticism and being downright mean. It concerns me that my supervisors have had to chat to me about emotional resilience around what people are going to say about my research, and that some of it may not actually be helpful, but hurtful." So from this, we could understand that research methods training could help prepare students to be resilient, but could it do more and help students be resistant? to come through their training challenging these wider educational structures that are so damaging. So our context of learning might need to shift from a teacher developing content to one that is more inclusive and collaborative with students and more acknowledging of the educational environment and university structures. For us, next steps include destabilizing existing learning hierarchies, recognizing that we're all research practitioners, towards intersectionality, thinking about our identities and how they impact on the research we want to do and how we do it. My research being a carer, being a cisgender woman, for example, being heterosexual, how does this combine to impact? And acknowledging our own vulnerabilities, fallibilities, failures are central to research methods training and practice. How will we do this? We're going to be explicit with students about the research journey. It's joyful, it's sorrowful, and it's messy. And we can do better to provide learning spaces for students to own the intended learning outcomes, to work with messy data, to think creatively about their research, to make decisions, and to play with risk while in a fairly safe learning environment, rather than shifting all of that learning out into field work where they're relatively unsupported. We can also expose our own vulnerabilities, failures, and fallibilities as teachers and as research practitioners, and we can be much more collaborative in terms of delivering a community of practice that then dismantles damaging institutional practices. And here are our email addresses if you're at all interested in joining in this community of practice.